Science and Kabbalah is a vast and complex topic. It's still hard to explain this topic in its entirety. I've been dealing with science and with Kabbalah for many years, but only lately have I begun to see the meeting point between them. This union began approximately 70 or 80 years ago, when scientists began to study subatomic particles and revealed that they have a dual nature. At times we see them as components of matter, and at other times we see them as waves, particles and waves. The way in which we sense them and understand them and see them depends on us, on the person who has the instrument in front of him. And then the question arises, do particles and all matter and waves or whatever in front of us have a definite form? The form is according to what extent we perceive it. This was a marvel for scientists, because then what really is the form of the world? If we replace our instruments and our senses, we'd see it in a different way. Not matter, but waves, or not waves, but some kind of plasma, or some other shapes, some other possibilities. And then there were more and more developments that began in scientific research. They asked, how do we perceive reality? How do we sense it? And what is reality? Does it have some kind of form outside of us? Or do we just envision it and then perceive it in front of our eyes? In recent years, scientists have begun to agree with what has been written in Kabbalah for thousands of years, that there is no reality outside of man that we can talk about, that we can grasp or research. Everything is according to our senses. Reality is, as is written in the wisdom of Kabbalah, some kind of an upper light, supposedly some type of force field, fields of forces, out of which we, through the angle of our vision, according to our definitions, our conditions, perceive and grasp some picture. It's evidently a holographic kind of image, in which, as we study it, what we see depends on our angle of observation. It all depends on our senses. The wisdom of Kabbalah explains it for us in a simple way, simpler than the scientists do. Kabbalah tells us that it's beneficial for a person to study the wisdom of Kabbalah, to excel and to complete, research a little and to know all of the wisdoms of the world. It will help them later on. From the lower, he will learn the upper, to feel and to penetrate a bit more into the understanding of the spiritual perception. Because in actuality, there's no difference between corporal and spiritual. If a person understands the way he or she perceives the corporal picture, how this picture emerges in front of him, then from that, it's easy to move on to the understanding of the spiritual perception. That's because it is truly a single person who is grasping both of the worlds. The wisdom of Kabbalah puts it this way. We have a desire to receive, which is the substance of the entire creation. which desires to receive fulfillment, to fill itself. The filling that it senses is felt by it according to its properties. If the desire to receive is small, it only feels its own existence, meaning its own livelihood, as we observe it in inanimate, vegetative, or animate. Even in small animals such as insects, in all sorts of simple life forms, if the desire to receive is bigger, it already begins to develop inside of it a system which is called an intellectual system, which helps it find fulfillment for itself. Then there's already a heart, a desire to enjoy, a desire to receive, and an intelligence behind it. So the larger the desire to receive is, then there's more of a need for a head and an intelligence which is greater in order to fill the desire to receive. And the more sophisticated a creation is, the more elaborate these two components will be. And the desire to receive reaches a state in which it can truly grasp the whole of reality, meaning to fill itself with the entire fulfillment that is intended for it, or at previous levels, previous parts and sections. What is the difference between the perception of the world when the desire to receive is at the level of this world, us, and the perception of the world when the desire to receive is at the spiritual level? The difference is really not big. We are within some reality. We have a very small desire to receive. Bodily pleasures, wealth, honor, power, knowledge. This is what we have in this world, a bodily desire to receive, and a desire to receive that develops in us through society, through environment. It's money, honor, knowledge. And if we work with the desire to receive at these levels, there is beside it surely an intellectual system that helps us fulfill this desire to receive, and then our perception of the world is limited in such a way as we now perceive it. Meaning that the desire to receive has certain inner properties, and the light that fills it forms together with the desire to receive a joint picture, such that it becomes the way we see the world, the way we see reality. Reality is not what's in front of us. It does not exist outside of us. But this reality depends specifically on our properties. In this reality, there's the revealed part and the concealed part. This reality divides into inanimate, vegetative, animate, speaking. It divides into solids, liquids, and gases. All is according to our properties. If we change our properties, reality would be different. It's just like when it was revealed that these particles, the electrons that looked one way, and then we see it's matter, and then we look at it a different way, and we see that it's waves. It depends on how the observation is done. We also, if we could change ourselves, we'd see a different reality. Where there was a concrete solid matter, since that's how we sense it, we would suddenly see an entirely different picture, different properties, because they're in accordance with our attributes. And indeed, in our time, science has reached the end of its evolution. It was 30 or 40 years ago that the crisis in science began, when the scientists started to realize that they couldn't develop any further without taking into consideration the properties of the person, the researcher. Then they reached a dead end, the end of science, because science always claims that we perceive reality according to unique formulas, no matter who's dealing with it. And suddenly all of reality is loose and wobbly. Everything depends on how we change ourselves. In this way, we can see the connection, the contact between the wisdom of Kabbalah and science. And if 20 or 30 years ago it was not possible to talk with scientists about the wisdom of Kabbalah, because they wouldn't have accepted this concept at all, today it's very different. They're willing to listen, they're ready to hear, and they're ready to hear that absolutely everything depends on us. Everything depends on man's properties. And all of reality is an imaginary reality, meaning that it is merely a projection of our own properties. Everything that we truly feel and where we act is in a world which we portray, which has no existence of its own. If we change our angle of observation, meaning our properties, we'll see waves instead of particles, and particles instead of waves. It's similar to comparing what scientists discovered in the 20s and 30s in the previous century. This means that now we can actually discuss this with scientists. We can turn to the entire world with a truly new explanation, which I would say would be revolutionary in most people's eyes. It will result in a great and important consequence. It all depends on us. Everything actually depends on the internality of man. Not only do we portray the world, make it look the way that it does to us, but in general, all that we do, the rules of the world, connections, the evaluations that seem to us as components of the world, they all depend on us. There is no law acting on us from outside. There's no definite reality outside of us. In short, there's nothing besides what we do. Therefore, all we need to know is in what way we should change. What would be the right angle for viewing the upper abstract light, which is incomplete rest? How do we receive its manifestation in the best way and get the optimal picture? The picture that would be best for us. This is exactly the subject of the wisdom of Kabbalah, which, contrary to all of the conventional wisdoms, does not discuss researching matter, which is external to us, but claims from the outset, in a simple way, how a person should change in order for the world that he or she perceives to change. This is actually the entire subject of the wisdom. We can also go to psychologists and doctors and to people dealing with ecology or anything that's related to the situation of the world and see that the big picture of the world today is really terrible. And this is something that everybody agrees on. All scientists of all fields agree that the world is in total despair. This is the reason for drug abuse, for the breakdown of family structure, and in general, for what's happening throughout society. All of this is happening not just because it's how the world evolves, but it's a projection of our desire to receive, which is growing, creating this kind of a picture, its own projection in us on the upper light, forming the picture that's in front of us. And it really was a marvel for me when a few years ago I began communicating with scientists, and I saw that they were starting to grasp it, to agree with this and accept it. Currently, I am writing with some of the greatest scientists in the world, writing 6 or 7 books simultaneously. 2 of them are being written in the United States with Daniel Matt and Barry Gordon from the universities of Stanford and Berkeley. The others are in Russia, and also with very important research institutions and great scientists in all fields. They're willing to participate. They understand that this is really going to be the next step in the development of scientists. So modern science is in reality the wisdom of Kabbalah, in a way that all we need today is to demonstrate for people how smooth the transition is. Just as previously we could only look outside and we saw the world, thinking that there's a reality that exists on its own, it's unrelated to us. Now scientists are gradually understanding and accepting this because it's becoming clear to them, out of their experiments, out of what they do, their research of reality. They've already transferred the observation and the cause of what's happening to them from outside into the person who's observing and performing the experiment. So now, it's relatively easy to explain this to even regular people who don't deal with the wisdom, to psychologists, who, interestingly, are experiencing the same phenomenon, reaching the same conclusions, getting the same results. Our work today is only to create some smooth transition and to demonstrate to humanity that the whole picture of the world is a projection of our senses, of our properties. If we want to improve the world, we must improve ourselves. The world won't change on its own. The world itself is upper light, which is in total rest. This is something that we can read in the latest scientific publications on astrophysics. They're reaching a state in which our entire universe is totally one single thought, which acts in a thoughtful and purposeful way. Ecologists are reaching the conclusion that the whole Earth, along with its atmosphere, is in totality some sort of behaves like a living creature, something that has life and wisdom, a plan, reacting to us in a unique way like some living organism. Out of these studies, they're actually reaching the same conclusion that both the Earth and the universe, as well as all life forms, from the smallest to the entire universe, are all a projection of man's properties. The bottom line is that all of the wisdom that we've developed over thousands of years really only are a small part of our study of reality. And now, the wisdom of Kabbalah comes and absorbs all of these wisdoms and works together with them and explains to man how to research a true and correct reality. This is what's happening today right in front of our eyes. The true reality is that reality which we will feel, see, and sense if we change according to the light that's inside of us. In relation to what? In relation to the attribute of the light. We reveal reality according to our equality of form to it. This means that when we discuss ordinary science, each phenomenon that I discover because I somehow equalized my properties with some phenomenon. For example, I usually explain this in a simple way about waves. There are some waves outside my ear. I perceive them only in the condition that I have in me a system that can portray that wave, like, for example, a radio receiver. It has in it a circuit that can recreate the same waveform as the one outside. Then, by the effect of resonance, it receives this outside wave and passes it on to an amplifier and a speaker. If I want to perceive a certain reality, I need to know in advance what inner properties I need to have in me. We're naturally born with 5 senses. In each sense, there's a certain specific range in which we perceive some reaction in us that's occurring outside. We only perceive what is outside within a special range. Let's say from 15 hertz to 15 kilohertz. And this is so with vision as well, with anything. That's the way we're built, and that's why we see the world within these ranges, 5 ranges. It's possible that if we would have, besides these 5 senses, additional senses, with other ranges, then of course the picture of the world would be different. This is the image that's projected inside of us, our reaction to something that's outside of us. Outside there are waves, let's say upper light, a wave at an infinite frequency. But I only perceive some small fraction of it, some small impression at certain frequencies, and that is what is projected in me. That's my picture of reality. And that's how I feel myself. And that's how I feel an external reality, meaning that this picture is certainly a projection of my properties. No, it's not a matter of predisposition. Our picture is a result of our inner properties. If I can't change my properties, then that's how I'm built. But if I can change my properties, if I could, I'd see things differently, to the extent that substance would change. My primary substance, the desire to enjoy, the desire to receive, is defined in a very, very unique way. To change it is possible only if I elevate above it. And for that, I need to enter into the subject of the wisdom of Kabbalah. What does it deal with? What does it mean, the wisdom of Kabbalah? It is the wisdom of how to grasp, perceive, and receive reality according to what you choose to be.